know that all things work together for good, for them that what? Love God, who have been called according to his purpose. I'll read it in NIV. NIV says, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. All things work together for good of for those that love God. In other words, when you obey the commandment that says, love the Lord with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, when you obey that commandment, God says all things will work together for your good. Why? Because you love me. You are obeying the first and prime commandment. And as a result, the reward for that is that all things will work together for your good. In all things work together. All things including everything you are going through presently. All things include everything that you have been through in the past. All things include everything you will go through in the future, whether positive or negative. All things work together for good, for them that love God. It means every pain that you've ever been through will eventually work out for you good. It means every failure that you've ever experienced will eventually work out for your good. It means every disappointment you have ever experienced will eventually work out for your good. Every heartbreak that you've ever experienced, that you've ever been through, will eventually work out for your good. In fact, every rejection that you've ever faced or had in your life will eventually work out for your good. Why? Because all things, not some things, it says all things work together for good. All things work together for good. And you know, it can be hard to believe that, because when you're going through what you're going through, it's hard to see a way out. It's hard to see how this thing is going to turn around in my favor. When you're going through pain, when you're going through disappointments, when you've had rejection upon rejection and it seems that nothing is working out for you, when you find yourself in a situation where maybe you've lost something, your business is going down the drain, and things just do not seem to be working, and life just seems to be throwing you, a raw deal. Maybe some people right now have lost jobs, and some people have lost spouses, and family breaking down, and so many different things happen in life. People have gone through abuse, molestation, and people have been through so many bad things, so many bad and rough experiences, and it's hard to ever see how something good can come out of such a bad and negative situation. It's hard to see how joy can come out of sadness. It's hard to see how gladness can come out of mourning, but the Bible says that all things work together for good. All things work together for good, meaning that regardless of what you've been through, regardless of the challenges you find yourself in, regardless of the storms life throws at you, regardless of past failures and experiences, and regardless of even disability, regardless of, lack of education and lack of qualification, and regardless of family background, and regardless of, maybe you weren't accepted by some people, and maybe you had challenges in home and family, regardless of whatever you've been through in life, the Bible says that all things work together for good. All things work together for good. And an example of that is the story of Ruth. In the Bible, if you've ever read the story of Ruth, you will discover that Ruth, she was the daughter-in-law of Naomi. And what happened was, Ruth her husband passed away. And when you think about that, that in itself must have been a very painful experience, because Ruth was just a young woman. She wasn't like an old woman, she's just a young lady. And the chances are, maybe they were only married for about 5 years or so. So imagine this young couple just starting out their life, just starting out their marriage, with dreams of happily ever after, and you dream of getting old and grey together, and seeing your children and your children's children, and retiring together, going on holidays and doing things together as you grow older together, and you have that vision in your mind, and you just expect that life will just turn out rosy that way. And then, let's just say 5 years into the marriage, her husband's taken away. He passes on, he dies. We don't know the terms of his death. We don't know whether he was sick for a long time and then died. We don't know whether it's something that just suddenly struck, maybe an accident just out of the blue. We can relate this slightly to a couple that I know, whom just a couple of years ago, everything was fine. Young couple, maybe in the early 40s. And the husband travels away to Nigeria on business. And before you know it, the wife is getting a phone call saying, your husband is dead. The same husband that said, I'm just going away for a few weeks. I'll be back. We're going to celebrate Christmas together. And then she gets a phone call and says, he's gone. Unexpected. Out of the blue. What do you do in that kind of a situation? Imagine the pain, the confusion. And Ruth might have found herself in the same kind of situation, thinking to herself, God, why has this happened to me? Why am I going through this? Why am I experiencing this? Why should my husband be taken away from me at this point in our lives? We haven't even really started. We're just a few years into this thing. And now my husband has been taken away from me. Imagine the pain, imagine the loneliness, knowing that your better half has been taken away from you. The person that used to hold you and tell you he loves you, and the intimacy that you shared, and the relationship that you shared, all of a sudden taken away from you, cut off from you. What do you do when you find yourself in that kind of a situation? Imagine the pain that she must have been going through. Imagine the pain that she must have been going through. But the Bible says that all things work together for good. Meaning that even when you find yourself in such a situation that you might have lost a loved one, out of the blue, just suddenly, calamity just strikes. The Bible says that even then all things work together for good for them that love God, that are called according to his purpose. When we later on continue to read the story of Ruth, we find that her story doesn't end there. Yes, the story started with pain and disappointment and heartbreak and sadness, mourning. But the Bible says, weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Ruth went through her time of weeping and mourning for her husband. She went through a time of pain and sadness, but the story does not end there. And that's encouragement. That regardless of what we're going through right now, no matter how painful the situation may seem right now, tomorrow will be better. Because all things will work together for good. It says, as we continue to read the story of Ruth, we discover that later on, she moves back to Naomi's hometown with, Naomi, her mother-in-law. They go back to Naomi's hometown, and she begins to work in the fields, just scraping around to look for something to eat, for food to eat. And, cut a long story short, she ends up meeting a guy called Boaz. And